As Dr. Young outlined, today we're here to ask the board to advertise the public hearings for the fiscal year 24 budgets, the fiscal year 23, the calendar year 23 tax rates, the calendar year 23 fire and emergency services levy, expansion of the elderly and disabled tax relief program, the fiscal year 2024 through 33 capital improvement program, and the fiscal year 2024 Virginia Public School Authority issuance. So to work through some of these, starting with the fiscal year 2024 budget, the proposed budget includes a almost $2 million operating increase. This increase does provide for sheriff staffing, 13 at about 2.8 million. Fire and rescue, 16 staff members at almost 4, and 6 general government employees. It does have increased debt service for schools of almost $5 million. That's primarily related to the high school number 6 and some 3R costs. We do have some inflationary costs isolated, about $570,000. What this proposed budget does not include are within the county some department identified operating increase of just over $7 million, or the equivalent of 3.2 cents on the tax rate. There's a number of general government positions that were not funded, about $2.3 million. And then, of course, public safety unfunded positions, fire rescue of 16 positions, and sheriff 8 additional positions. The school operating increase is $11.7 million, and so it does not fund. It does not fund at the superintendent's proposed budget or the school board's adopted budget. That would require for the superintendent's budget a 3.7 cent increase, and for the school board's budget a 16.8 cent increase.
Supervisor Vanucci has a question.
Can you go back to that one slide? I just want to ask a clarifying question. So we have our county administrator's budget, the superintendent's budget, and then the school board's adopted budget. These tax rate increases, is that on top of, so let's say that our county administrator's budget is the 9 cent tax increase, but that has school funding and like sheriff's deputies, et cetera, et cetera. Did you take the superintendent and the school board's adopted budget and add in all of that on top of all of our county administrator's items in addition to the school requests?
That is correct, Supervisor Vanucci. In this slide that I pulled up may help kind of identify that a little bit. So the county administrator's proposed budget
I just want to make sure we weren't talking about just school funding.
Right.
Okay.
Is a 9 cent increase. Then for the superintendent, it would be another 3.7 cent increase, and for the schools, it would be, the school board, it would be 16.8.
And really quick, just because I know the schools asked for 2 things. They asked for their budget in one meeting, but in the fall, you'll remember they did a lot of these growth management meetings, and they asked for $500 million in new school infrastructure under CIP needs. Is that reflected anywhere in here?
No, there are a number of projects that the schools asked for in the CIP that were not able to fit within our current debt capacity. And so we will look at those on March 28th as part of our budget work session to grapple with how to put those into the CIP, or if the board has any changes to what was discussed in December when we looked at the CIP.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. There have been some adjustments since the budget was proposed. First, there's a decrease in school debt service of $344,000. You may recall that this year the county went out for a VPSA standalone issuance, and that standalone issuance was just completed, and that was after the budget was proposed, so we had a more conservative approach to what that debt service would be. And for revenues, when we looked at the elderly and disabled relief, that increased cost, we had assumed that would be about $600,000. And the Commissioner of the Revenue's Office did much more precise analysis. And so that is only going to be about $115,000 decrease in revenue. So that in essence brings an additional $485,000 of revenue. These are the expenditures that are included in the county's 5-year financial plan. And so I wanted to provide this for you in context to what you'll be deciding today. In this 5-year plan, to fund this plan, the calendar year tax rates go up to $1.11 in calendar year 2028. I've highlighted the green area on the bottom to show the increase in both school and county debt service. That school debt service is primarily from elementary school 18, 19, probably the beginning of Hartwood rebuild, and of course, high school number 6. For the county debt service increase, this is primarily related to the advent of the courthouse and having that courthouse come on. This debt service does not include anything for transportation. And of course, the fire levy, as we've talked about before, pulls that debt service out of the general fund, so that's not included. I think something else that's important to highlight here is the school operating transfer, which I didn't actually highlight, but that goes up $9 to $10 million on average every year. When we looked at the superintendent's 5-year plan, his 5-year plan goes up about $50 million every year. So we are certainly not aligning the county's 5-year plan yet with the needs of the school. This here shows you the history of the advertised rate compared to the adopted rate. And this really just does reemphasize that the advertised rate sets the upper limit for the tax rate. So the board may go below that as they adopt, but they cannot go above that without having an additional public hearing. And then that may impact the timing of the bills for personal property and real estate and may negatively impact our citizens.
Supervisor Vanucci?
So just one more question, because I heard some chitter chatter in the audience, and I just wanted to clarify. They talked about us bringing down the tax rate last year, for example. Can you explain what an assessment year is and why that moves the numbers up and down? Because last year, the board did vote on a tax increase, but it looks like the taxes decreased.
That's correct. Thank you, Supervisor Vanucci. So in fiscal year or calendar year 2022, an equalized rate would have been about 78 cents. So the board did adopt something above an equalized rate when they adopted 85 cents. So because the assessments went up so high, the values went up so high, the tax rate could come down, so that would be equalized.
I just wanted to comment, piggyback on what Supervisor Vanucci said. There are some counties that leave both of them the same, leave it high, and therefore some of the constituents may be confused as to in terms of why we do balance act here. And some areas, they just leave it as such, and they're able to continue to do that.
Because we have Commissioner Majowski, and he makes us do that every year. And now by law, you have to.
Yeah, thank you.
So this slide we briefly went over earlier. Again, the proposed budget would be at 94 cents. The superintendent's budget would be at 97.7, and then the school board's budget this is cumulative, so to do everything in the proposed, everything in the superintendent's, and then the additional from the school board would be 114.5. We typically provide this to the board in what median assessed homes and the impact of that. So you'll see that kind of in the middle of this chart here. The proposed would be $347 annually. The superintendent's budget would be $491, and the school board budget would be 1,139. Now, of course, that fluctuates based on your assessed value and your home price.
Supervisor Baumke has a question.
Right, thank you, Madam Chair. So I just want to make sure this does not include anything for fire and rescue. That tax levy is completely separate, is that correct?
That is correct, Supervisor
Okay.
Baumke.
And then for right now, for every 1 penny where we move the tax rate, that generates $2.2 million?
3 million. Mhm.
2.2 million, okay, thank you.
The personal property tax rate was proposed in the budget at $4.99. The Commissioner of the Revenue's Office is continuing to review those vehicle valuations that are dropping back, in some cases, to pre-calendar year 2022. The board may recall that we had seen this large increase last year in vehicle prices because the supply really went down through COVID. And so there was a spike in these vehicle prices. So the board had brought down the tax rate from 610 to I think it was 450. So what we had assumed was that we would receive an additional $6.4 million in revenue from personal property. Part of that would be increased to help fund transportation at about $3.1 million. And some of that was just from natural growth. We typically have seen over the past 10 to 15 years about a 3% growth in the valuation of our personal property. So we do recommend, outside of the proposed budget, that the board advertises this tax rate at $6.10 with the effective rate of $3.05. The Commissioner of the Revenue's Office is going to continue to do the analysis to see what that tax rate needs to be to hit $6.4 million. This would allow the board the flexibility to be able to adopt up to that rate.
May I ask a question here? Ms. Light, is this, this happened during COVID when used car sales rose so high and everybody couldn't afford new cars, simply not because they couldn't afford it, but also because that chip was not in. And so everybody resorted to used cars, and now we're back to like kind of normal.
Absolutely. And Dr. Young, it's for us accounting nerds type people, we are on VGFOA listserv, and we're looking at all these other counties are talking about how their valuations are also really declining 20 to 30%. And they're also seeing this. So it's not a Stafford County, it's a Commonwealth-wide.
Supervisor Cohen?
So as we move forward on this, can you send us sort of as up to date as you can get, because they're in the same mesh we are, on what our peers are doing, so that we know whether or not they're doing, how high they're going and whatnot. I know that when we did this before, we looked at our peer communities, so that be in line with what we've done.
Absolutely. Tax rates for all of our other funds, our service districts that are supported by taxes are all proposed at a flat tax rate. We spent some time at the budget work session earlier today talking about the fire and emergency services levy. And so this is the 5-year plan for if the board adopts that. This assumes a 3-cent levy across the 5-year period. This provides all funding for the capital funds that are necessary to build out fire and emergency services buildings, to provide apparatus, and to fund their debt service. We also spent some time earlier today looking at this tax rate considerations to support the 5-year financial plan for the fire and rescue levy. Obviously, at 0 cents, we can't do much of anything. But as we move from 1 to 3 cents, we start to be able to do a little bit more. At 1 cent, we could cash fund from this one of the 3 annual replacements of ambulances. As we get to 2 cents, that becomes 2 of 3. And at 3 cents, that is all 3 of 3. We can cash fund the replacement of apparatus, which is between $1 to $2 million annually, which right now we're using master lease funds. We can reduce from our general fund, which has been proposed, almost $8 million of debt service that would be paid out of the fire service levy.
Okay.
Supervisor Cohen?
Just a couple of things that were brought up this afternoon, but not everybody was glued to the TV set or sitting in the room. So, and I'll start with Ms. Finucci's item. On the item that says funds for debt service for Aquia and Rock Hill.
Don't steal my thing
oh.
from the committee. No.
Oh, okay, I was going to give you credit because you brought it up. Where it says, no, I mean, basically, we're going to pay it one way or the other. It just means if we do the fire levy, the money comes out of that pool, whereas if we don't do it, it comes from another pool, the general fund. Second item is that if we don't do the fire levy, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I thought I listened to you correctly, then we're going to have to either raise the regular tax rate up for the 2.8 million that has to go back in the general fund, or cut 2.8 million out of somewhere else to make up, or just say we're not buying all this fire equipment that was on the list.
So
That's sort of our options. I think people know where I
you
stand.
have option 1 and option 2. This $2.8 million is, you could refer to it as sunk costs. These are costs that the county will be incurring because of decisions that were made and apparatus and Station 14. So those will be going forward, whether it's in the general fund or the fire and rescue levy. So Supervisor Cohen, you are correct. If the fire levy is not approved, then it will go back into the general fund.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. And this is much like I provided earlier for the real estate tax. So the fire and rescue levy, this impact to the tax bill, what a citizen would see, ranges from $77 up to a median home of $115. And then we have some single-family home values at the higher end.
Supervisor Fanucci has a question.
I just want to kind of point out, you have a single-family house with 20 acres, median assessed value for $615,000. Where are those houses? Because I would like to buy one. Because I looked for land when I have my horses, and I can't find any land in Stafford under $1 million, so. Yeah, Scott, I need that list.
So this budget does propose to expand the elderly and disabled tax relief. That relief would provide up to 50% of their county real estate taxes, up to $3,500, which is an increase from $3,000. The impact of this reduction is $115,000. And again, we had estimated in the proposed budget that would be about $600,000. And so we have some increase in revenue if the board continues to adopt this. The CIP is also in your packet, and this is a 10-year balanced program that meets as many of the needs of the county schools and transportation that are within debt capacity. The schools include the remaining funding of elementary school 18 and high school 6, along with elementary school 19, Hartwood, Drew Middle School, and many other projects. The county projects include all the fire and rescue that we discussed that are part of this fire levy for your consideration. There's a number of transportation and, of course, utility projects, which was presented at the budget work session earlier today. For Virginia Public School Authority issuance of $33 million. This really supports elementary school number 18 and 3R program, 3R projects. So you may note that this doesn't add up exactly to 33 million. We typically leave some room in there in case it is sold at a premium or discount so that the schools get the proceeds that they need. So they get 23.2 million, they get 6.6 without any sort of limitations. So today, we're asking the board to approve the advertisement of a public hearing for the 24 budget, the 23 tax rate, the 23 fire and emergency services levy, the expansion of the elderly and disabled tax relief program, the fiscal year 24 through 33 capital improvement program, and the 24 Virginia Public School Authority issuance. In the packet that was provided online, you'll find all the individual resolutions that support each of these actions, and that will be before you for adoption on April 18th. So today, we're asking you to advertise this public hearing. This could be proposed in a motion as is listed here, with the real estate tax rate, the personal property tax rate, and the fire and emergency services tax rate listed out, and all of the other advertisements would be as approved as with resolution 23-73.